When you've got to embroider on the corner of a serviette or another small project, a cuff or a collar on a shirt or something like that, it's often difficult to hoop. And so in this case, I'm going to look at doing the corners of serviettes, but you could apply that to other small projects. I find it's easier to stitch a placement line onto the stabilizer and then tape the project in place and then stitch the design. So if I bring up a picture for you, so here I'm going to embroider on the corner of this serviette, and I've made a placement line. It's underneath here. You can see here though the next placement line for the next serviette, because I'm doing more than one in a hoop. But you don't have to do more than one in a hoop. You can do a single one, but you need to have this placement line to get your serviette in the right place so that your embroidery will be in the right place on the corner of the serviette. I've put masking tape here, but I also put some pins, but I found when I actually embroidered this I didn't need the pins because I did a placement stitching. So I'll go through all that with you, and I just smoothed the fabric out while I was stitching the placement line. So let's just go through the process of how I organised that for the hooping. So I'll just minimize that picture. So this is the little design I'm going to do, but it could equally be a monogram or any other sort of small design you want to put on. So I'm zoomed quite far in at the moment, so I'm going to zoom out quite small. So I'm about 70% there at the moment. Now version 8 has got a wonderful tool called the work area, and it's up here in the top icons, just to the left of the stitch player. So if you select that, a shaded work area will appear. Now mine's huge by default. I must have set it at something rather large. So it's a rectangle by default as well. Now you can set the size of this by right clicking on that icon, and you'll get a dialog up, and you can choose whether you want a circle or a square or a rectangle, and then you've got a width and height for the square or the rectangle, or you can have a diameter for the circle. So in this case I'm doing a square, and I've got my locked, so I can put in here the dimension of my square serviette. So that's going to be 450 millimeters square. So I'm typing in 450 in here, and I don't need to do the height because I've got the locked, so I can just press enter. And now my work area is the size of my serviette. This allows me to place that design exactly where I want it on the serviette. So I can zoom in here now, and I can decide where I want that design. Now it's a good idea to group your whole design if you've got various elements, and then when you select it, the whole design will be selected, and you can place that where you want. Now if you're really fussy about getting that square in the corner exactly lined up, there's a little trick you can do. So if you come up to the corner of your rulers, you can left click and drag, and that will put the 0 points for the rulers on that corner of that work area, and then just drop that there. So now my 0 is lined up with this side and also the bottom edge. So now I can bring in a guideline. So if I think, yes, that's as high as I want to go with that design on that corner, I can bring in my horizontal guideline, which comes from the left hand side ruler. So you just click in the ruler and you can come down. You can move your cursor out into the work area, but you need to click in the ruler to get it started, and just bring that guideline down till it crosses through the selection handles of the design and drop it. And then you can read on here on the ruler exactly where it is. So I've got the 100 mark here, then I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 points and about a quarter. I could zoom in and get that more accurate. 1, 2, 3, 4, and yeah, about a third actually. And if you keep zooming in, it'll get exactly. So I've got 140 when I zoom in. It's on that little mark there. So what I need to do is put my vertical guideline. So I'll just zoom out and back into here, and I'm zooming in, and I'm going to bring my vertical, which comes from the top ruler, so just click anywhere in the top ruler to create a guideline and bring it across to roughly where you think it's got to go. Now, what did I say the other number was? That was clever, I've forgotten, so I'm going to zoom in here and check it again. 144 actually when I zoom in there. So I've got to get to 144 up here, so zoom out and zoom in here at the ruler and bring that across to 144. Okay, they match now. So when I check here in my little design, I haven't got this across to the right far enough to get it centered. So I'll just select it again and left click and drag it till I get it into the right position. And I might need to use my arrows on my keyboard, so my right hand arrow will just move it, nudge it across till I'm got it in the right spot. Oops, probably went one too far. There we go. So now I'm happy with the position of that. So now I can create a placement line because I know exactly where the corner of the serviette will be in relation to the design. So I'll just get rid of that guideline and that guideline. So you just left click and drag them off with the little yellow handles. And so now all I need to do is digitize an open object, and you only need 3 clicks. You're going to use outlines, single, and choose a color that's not in your design. So in this case I'll choose the turquoise. And where you want to do, you want to start your placement line just above the design and then click in the corner and then click just to the right of the design. If I'd left my guidelines in, I could have used those and gone just past them, but anyway, that's close enough. I can do it by eye, and enter. So now you've got a placement stitch line, and that'll be your 3rd color. Now you'll need to stitch that first, so select it and move it to the top of the color film, and that will stitch first. Okay, I'm going to click off so nothing's selected. And now I want a basting stitch. Now if I was to rely on my sewing machine basting stitch, it would consider this basting line as part of the design, and the basting stitch, it would consider this placement line, is that what I said, as part of the design. And so the basting stitch would go outside that and around the whole design. We don't want that. So we're going to create our own manual basting stitch, and I just used an ellipse. So I select the ellipse tool, and again I still want the single run, and make an ellipse and enter. And I can move that across if I want by selecting it and just moving it across so that it's more evenly spaced around the design. Now I want to go to the object properties for that ellipse because I don't want it to stitch in short 2mm stitch lengths, which is the default. So I'm going to increase that to 6mm and go OK, so that it's nice long stitches that I can easily unpick afterwards. Now my whole design is organized, ready to hoop. So I can bring in a hoop. I'm going to hide the work area again by clicking on the icon so it disappears, and bring in my hoop. Now if you were doing a single hooping, that's all you would need to do. You don't need, so long as the whole design fits in your hoop, you're fine. But if you've got a large hoop, you can actually create multiples of this. Actually, I forgot, the basting stitch has to go second. So, and I've made it the same color as the placement line, which I don't want. So while I've got the basting stitch selected, I'll make that a different color again. We'll make that one, don't like using pink. Let's use lime green. Okay, and we'll move that second from the top. So up to the top and down one color, we'll do that. So what's going to stitch first is the placement line, then you'll put your serviette on there, and then you'll stitch your basting stitch, and then your design. Okay, now as I said, if you've got a large hoop, you might be able to fit more than one in the hoop, which saves you re-hooping for every single embroidery. So if you're doing a set of serviettes, you could try and get as many as you can in the hoop. So what I'll do is group the whole design by selecting the first object, holding my shift key down, selecting the last object, right clicking and group. So now that's grouped, I want to start at the top of the hoop, so I'm going to just zoom out a bit and right click and drag that design down below, so that's the next one that's going to stitch, and I'm going to leave myself just a tiny little gap between the two. Okay, so now I've got 2 in this hoop, and that's all I can fit in this hoop because of where I put this. Now I could move this one up closer to that one, but I would have to be very careful to move this part of the serviette out of the way before I stitch this second design and tape it out of the way. I did actually do some, and I've obviously put my design a bit far away from the corner, because if I open one of my recent designs, here's one where I actually fit 3 in the hoop, so I had the design closer to the corner. So you may be able to fit 3 in a hoop depending on the size of your hoop. I also stitched all the placement lines first because I've actually got 2 colours in my design, so I still got to stop after my design in order to stop and place the next serviette in the right place to stitch. And I'll just bring up another photo. So here you can see where I was stitching out. So I've stitched the first design and I've peeled back that serviette and taped it out of the way so that I can place my next one, and I fit 3 in a hoop. So I hope that helps you when you're doing your serviettes or other small projects in actually getting the design in the right place, and if you do multiple in a hoop, it does save you some time.